Welcome in the latest episode of the Five the Five on the Floor podcast on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Make sure to check out 5reasonsports.com. Spell it out, F-I-V-E, reasonsports.com, and also our YouTube channel. I can guarantee you we'll be pumping out more content than anybody else just because sports have stopped, and they haven't totally stopped. Does not mean we're going to stop, and we have enough contributors that people want to stay busy, so we're going to be giving you content to get you through this period. Also want to tell you about one of the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, the Seltzer Mayberg Law Firm. You can find them at onecalllegal.com. That's O-N-E, calllegal.com. They've got someone there 24 hours a day to handle your case, whether it's immigration, slip and fall, personal injury, traffic tickets, sports law, just about anything else. They handle everything at the Seltzer Mayberg Law Firm. They're located right there in Miami Shores, which is North Miami, right before the Golden Glades, right off of I-95. So if you have any legal issues you've been meaning to take care of, you got some spare time on your hands, this is a good time to do it. The Seltzer Mayberg Law Firm, onecalllegal.com. And now, today's episode.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a Miami Heat and NBA podcast from Ethan Skolnick with Alphonse Sidney, a.k.a. Alf954. Brought to you by the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
All right, Ethan Skolnick back, and we told you we're going to keep giving you content, even though there are no games. There's still plenty to cover for now on coronavirus, but actually we're going to do more of a basketball Miami Heat episode today. No Alf today. He was on my last 2 episodes, so check those out where we kind of handled everything that was going on with the suspension, and we will continue to follow up on all of that. But today I've got Alex Toledo and Nekias Duncan, and like I said, we're going to do more of a strict basketball sort of salary cap planning type episode, not knowing whether the Heat season is over. If you need me to catch you up, what the NBA is looking at for this season, from everything that I've been able to gather from talking to people in the league and also those who speak to those in the league, is to still salvage some of the regular season, but they don't really know when things are going to be over. They want to salvage some of the regular season for CBA reasons and also for TV reasons, to at least play a few games. It doesn't really have to do anything with seeding and then get to the playoffs. And if the regular season is over, the Miami Heat would open with the Indiana Pacers in a 4-5 matchup. But again, we don't know how this is going to play out. We don't know if Broward and Dade are going to be on lockdown the next 2 weeks. We don't know what's going to happen with this situation. So we're just going to focus on basketball-related stuff today. Alex, Nekias, there was actually some sort of news, although I don't know, how strong either story was, but there were a couple of reports. Barry Jackson had a report. There was also a report out of San Antonio by a reporter, Jabari Young, who used to cover the Blazers and also the Spurs, and now works, I believe, for NBC or CNBC. And the 2 reports I think are kind of related. Goran Dragic, DeMar DeRozan. Let's handle the DeRozan thing first before we get to Goran, because Jabari's reporting, Jabari, again, has a lot of ties in the Spurs organization, that the Heat were pretty serious about going after DeMar at the trade deadline. We heard a lot about Gallinari. We didn't hear as much about DeRozan. I'll start with you, Nekias. First thing, is he even a good fit for the Heat?
It's not a great fit. I think he has value kind of in the same ways that Jimmy Butler does as a pick-and-roll ball handler, as a guy that gets to the rim and a guy that can create a lot of free throws. Has a very nice mid-range game, good pull-up shooter from mid-range. Does not shoot threes well and doesn't shoot them at all at this point. So that kind of tanks his value a little bit. And then he's just kind of a wet tissue paper on defense. Like, he has some decent sides. You kind of hide him on the worst offensive player on the other team. But he just isn't very instinctual. As athletic as he is on the offensive end, he doesn't move his feet well. Defensively, he doesn't really feel the game well. He's a liability in every sense of the word.
And to that point, if he's a liability in every sense of the word and there's duplication with Jimmy, I think, Alex, you and I had talked about DeMar before the break and whether or not it made sense for them. Jimmy hasn't stopped shooting threes, but has never shot them worse than now. And he has cut back on the number quite a bit. But the other issue that Nekias brings up, and this, I like DeMar. I like DeMar personally, and I think that probably colors my opinion on this a little bit. And I know obviously he has a very close relationship with Dwayne, as do a lot of the 2 guards in the league who've been elite over the past few years. But my issue with DeMar is the playoff thing with him. Like, it's real. With Kyle Lowry, there's some question because there's been some up and down moments. Like DeMar's numbers tank in the playoffs. They are polar opposite to what they do in the regular season. I mean, do you just beyond the basketball, is he someone you'd want to bring in with where the Heat are trying to go?
I mean, it's definitely not my favorite idea. I can kind of, get the logic more or less. Like it's almost like a cheaper version of the other moves they've been rumored to be interested. Beal, Oladipo, Gallinari, any of these guys that it's essentially to fill the role of, main scorer on the team or somebody to really help as far as shot creation and to take that pressure off of Jimmy and Bam, who neither of them are necessarily 1A scorers. And I think DeRozan, like on a 1-year deal, is not the worst idea, I guess. It depends on the rest of the team and what else you can do to surround the team with good defenders, because you would absolutely need that. It's good that they have shooters that they can kind of play around those guys right there, but it's definitely an awkward fit. I don't know. Would they be able to construct a good defensive team around them if you're putting all your money this summer into DeRozan? I don't know how that looks,
Well, that's the thing. And so to kind of back to you on this, and then we'll kind of get into the Dragic piece of this because I think all of it fits together a little bit. If they're going to, like I said, if they're going to play the two of them together, then you've essentially decided you're not having any 3-point shooting on their wings, right? So
you got to play like Hero and Duncan next summer or something.
Right. Hero, Duncan, and none, right? Like at least 2, and then you're playing super small. What would the lineups even look like with what they have now?
I think ideally, if you're bringing DeMar in, you would kind of have to sell him on the Goran role, be a high-minute 6-man, close out games if you have the jumper going, and if not, kind of give way to some shooters, especially since Spo looks like he's more comfortable doing those offense-defense subs at the end of games now. So I think DeMar would be an option for that. But, again, DeMar DeRozan has been a multiple-time All-Star, so it's hard to see him accepting that kind of role, especially since he's been pretty good in San Antonio the last couple of years. Right. Obviously not a superstar level guy, but, he's been a fringe All-Star talent, so that would be a pretty tough sell for him.
Yeah, that's what I think. Like, it's one thing to sell Goran on it when he had, entered fairly deep into his 30s, and they were trying to promote justice to that role. But, DeMar's not leaving like a bad organization, and he may not be happy there. I saw he came out on social media, basically said, "What is he?" We said like, "Where the bleep do they get to this stuff?" So maybe he didn't have an issue with being there, but it's clear that the Spurs. One of the things, Nekias, what do the numbers say on this? Because Matt Moore was doing a lot of work on this earlier this season. That basically the Spurs were better without Aldridge or DeRozan on the floor, like without either of them on the floor, they were better. Is that true?
It wouldn't surprise me just because San Antonio has a lot of good guards, especially like Derek White. He's really, really good defensively. And the reason that DeMar and Aldridge specifically was tanking the Spurs their on and off numbers is because they're so bad defensively. So once you sub them out for anyone with a pulse on the defensive end, then the offense doesn't drop because especially in the case of DeMar, you're probably replacing him with a guy that can shoot. Mm-hmm. So the offense gets better just by virtue of that. And then you're replacing him with a better defender. So the on and off numbers look a lot better there. So I haven't checked, but I would assume that's probably what it is.
All right, so let's get to the other piece of this. And I do want to touch on how this would all fit because I think it's a little confusing. And I actually have – people know Albert Nahmad. He's actually helping me off air right now. So
is Brian Goins for me.
Right. So we're getting a little bit of salary cap help. I do feel with Albert I can go to him because I'm kind of the guy who promoted him first on social media because I found his work a few years ago and was like, oh, my God, it's basically Andy Ellisberg is located out in California. And so Albert is, in my view, as good as anybody on this stuff who's outside the Heat organization. So he's presenting a little bit of context to me. So we'll get to that here in the second half of the pod. But let's just get to Dragic because there was a report that the Heat, and I don't think this is a surprise. We've talked about this on the podcast pretty much since the summer, that we were expecting a big balloon payment to Dragic for 1 year, who he wants to be here, as long as he accepted the 6-man role, which he did. And then after the 1 year, be a very team-friendly deal starting in 2021, couple of years, maybe $10 million total after the first year to basically get him to finish his career in Miami. And this is a little bit like what the Heat wanted to do with Dwayne, except the numbers were bigger. They wanted to give him the 1-year balloon payment, right? Actually, I think it was reverse, right? They were going to give him the less at first, and then we're going to give him the big balloon payment later. This time it would be give the balloon payment at first and then less later. So the number that's been floated out there, I think Barry had it, was something around 19 million is what Goran's associates are expecting. Your immediate reaction to Nekias on this was negative. Why?
I am just not in the market of paying a mid-30s guard that is a defensive liability and is already not an explosive athlete. I just don't think that ages well. And I get it's a one-year deal, and then I also get the connection that Miami has to Goran specifically. So I'm not even coming at it from a place to where it's not going to happen. I fully expect him to be in a Heat uniform next year. But, like, the first step has dropped some. And that's been kind of neutered by him developing a pull-up three, and that's been huge for him offensively. But he doesn't get to the rim as easily as he once did. He's not finishing as well as he once was. Defense, he was already kind of trying to push above his weight, and now that's just gone now. He's just a complete negative on the end of the floor, and I don't see how that gets better next year as he adds some more mileage, assuming the season picks back up. There's going to be some more wear and tear on his legs. Teams already target him. And if you're looking at Miami trying to build a contender, playoff basketball, especially in the last 5 minutes or so of games, is all about, okay, what mismatch can we hunt? Because teams know our set plays. They know what we want to do. So what mismatches can we hunt? And Goran is basically a traffic cone. So I'm just not in the business of giving those guys money, especially that much money, if you're saying he's not going to close out games for you.
Man, I tend to agree with most of what Nekias is saying there. It really is tough, right? Because it comes down – it's like almost a circumstantial thing with this team, right? Where it's like not only is Goran not a good defender at all and aging, he lost his first step and all that, but they've got, as we talked about a million times this season, they've got so many other bad defenders who can be targeted. And it just they kind of all compound each other and compound the problem, and you're just always running lineups with bad defenders, and that's going to end up being vulnerability in the playoffs, like Nekias mentioned. I would love and kind of do also expect Goran to be in a uniform next season. I think, he kind of deserves it after everything he went through, right? He was traded to be here on a contending team with Wade, Bosh, and Whiteside. Didn't really get to live out that fantasy. And now, I would like for him to be part of, of the team finally winning after those years that he had to put up with Hassan Whiteside being his best teammate. But it really is tough because you can't pick him over the other guys who are defensive liabilities. You can't prioritize him over Duncan, Nunn, or Hero on the perimeter.
Yeah, and you mentioned it, though. There's a sentimental issue here, too, and that's why I agree with Nekias. Goran's going to be back next year. They can't do it again. Now, I know Goran's not Dwayne, but they can't. I mean, they've repaired, they went overboard to repair that by paying a bunch of guys they shouldn't have paid, the 16, 17 guys, the James Johnson, the Tyler Johnson, Dion Waiters, Hassan Whiteside, et cetera. But they have repaired their image around the league, and agents I talked to have said that they've repaired their image around the league. And a guy like Goran, who's represented by Bill Duffy, who represents a bunch of other guys, who has, been the great citizen down here in every way, including accepting the six-man role this year that Dion Waiters would not accept. I think that this has been preordained. Like if Goran wants to be here, which he does, he's going to get close to $20 million next year, and it's just a question of whether or not he's willing to take less after that, which I think he will be. And then I do think it comes down to playing time and kind of who else they have and whether he's going to have exactly the same role. I think this break for him, provided that the team comes back this year, is a good thing, because to me, the last 5 or 6 games, he didn't look good. He looked like he looks when he's injured at times, and I think he's just tired. And Alex and I have talked about that. The way Spoelstra uses him, I think, is contributing to that now, because this thing where he comes in with 5 minutes left in the third quarter and doesn't leave the game for the next 17 minutes is not ideal, and I think it's worn on him in the last 5-6 minutes. He has to be, in my view, a spot player now. He's a 20 to 24 minute a game player at the most, and he shouldn't be used more than that. And that doesn't justify $19 million, but at the same time, I think they're going to give it to him anyway.
What if I pose the question to you guys like this? Can they re-sign all 4 and it will be a high-tax team? I think the answer is yes. From what Brian Goins is telling me, it sounds like basically, there's a reality where they re-sign all 4 guys and they're way into the tax, and maybe that's the reality where Goran gets 19 mil. Maybe Derek is the only guy who gets like a very small 3-year deal, like under $7 million type thing. with the player. I mean, with the team option for the third year or something like that. But is the reality just going to end up coming down to, re-signing all four or using the cap space elsewhere for somebody else bigger, like a Gallinari or DeRozan? Is that what it's going to end up coming down to?
It's stunning to me that you never did radio, because that is what's called a radio tease. We're going to hit that in the second segment of this podcast. All right, so we're going to tell you about another great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. You got to go to DoralToyota.com. We understand that you may not be leaving the house as much as you were before, so go to DoralToyota.com and check out what car you want. They've been in business for 50 years. They're celebrating their 50th anniversary over in Doral. And when you mention 5 Reasons, when you get in touch with them, you work directly with the manager. So what's better than that? You can go to the website, pick out your car, contact Doral Toyota, and work directly with a manager. They've got 1,500 new and used cars to choose from, and it's easy to get to when you go to the dealership. Right off of 826 and 836, a few blocks from International Mall. The roads aren't as busy right now. Doral's not as busy. So head over to Doral Toyota. It's over at 9775. That's 9775 Northwest 12th Street in Doral. Also, they've got in-house financing available for all your credit challenges. All right, let's get to Alex's question, because we've been trying to answer that. This is a little complex. But according to, and you spoke to Brian Goins of Heat Beat, and I've been communicating with Albert kind of off air here. And his answer on this, I asked, just to be sure, do they have bird rights on all these players? Goran Dragic, Myers Leonard, Jay Crowder, who said again, and he said it on our podcast already, said it last week, but he told Barry Jackson afterwards that he wants to be here in Miami. It's basically his not just second home, it's kind of his first home now. He's lived down here in the offseason for a long time, and he just moved a bunch of people down here. And also to Derek Jones Jr., who they have to give a qualifying offer to and then extend. And my question was basically, do they have bird rights in all of them? Can they go over the cap to sign them? And he said, this is Albert's answer. You tell me if Brian gave you something similar. Basically, yes, they can bring back everyone and use the mid-level exception, which, by the way, is over like $9 million now. Or they can use cap room, whichever they choose. But either way, any multi-year deals would cut into 2021 cap room. So let's just ask this question. Nekias, I'll start with you. Would you, if you don't have to go past 2021, if you can just do one-year deals with these guys, would you bring them all back, even if it means you're going to push in a luxury tax? And the players I'm mentioning again, this is not bringing in DeRozan, but this is bringing in, although it might preclude you from bringing in a DeRozan. Mm-hmm. Dragic, Leonard, Crowder, DJJ, and put them in order if you can.
Putting them in order, I would say Crowder first. I think what he provides as a three-point shooter, even though that's starting to regress a little bit, I think he's going to be a mid-30s guy, and that combined with him being able to guard both forward spots, I think he helps unlock Miami's switching scheme a bit. I think he should be prioritized first. I would probably go Myers Leonard second. Just having a stretch five alongside Bam has helped. That starting lineup was really good. You have to see how Myers looks once he comes back from the ankle injury. I think he's shown you some stuff. Derek Jones Jr. will probably be third for me. He's another guy that I personally been kind of low on, just because I'm looking through the playoff lens. What does the shot look like, and our team's going to ignore him and things of that nature. But he's clearly an important part of Miami's young core. Because, Justice Winslow isn't here and Derek Jones Jr. is. I think that's just kind of what that is. And I would say Goran last, as I mentioned earlier, he's an aging guard that cannot defend at this point, and I feel like that's going to get worse. And then the price tag on Goran looks like it's going to be higher than everyone else's, so that also tanks his value for me in that list.
And if you look at value, and then I'll get to you, Alex, on this, let me try to throw some numbers out there. If Goran is 19, and look, the cap may change again because – we may not have a full season. And remember, 25% of the NBA revenue comes from the playoffs, roughly. So you already had the China situation. I'm not talking about coronavirus. I'm talking about Daryl Morey's comments that lowered the cap. And now you may not have a full season played. So these numbers may look totally different. But let's just base it on what we expected it to be. If Goran is a $19 million player, what is Jay Crowder's value? $10 million a year? $12 million a year on a 1 year?
I would say around the 12 million. Yeah, about 12 for him.
Okay. Myers? What do we think?
Myers probably going to float around I don't see him getting more than like Thomas Bryant got last year.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe 1 year, $8 million ish, if he'll take that.
He loves it here. I mean, that might play into it, and he's smart enough to understand the importance of the organization, the no state tax, and all that. I think he may be looking for 10. So, does that change your view if it's 10 million for Myers?
I mean, if it's a 1 year deal and going into the tax anyway, I guess there really isn't much reason to quabble over that.
So it's basically all or nothing then, because from what I understand, I'm also reading Albert's article at the same time that we're doing this, and it confirms everything we've been saying. It's basically either, you're operating as an above the salary cap team, wherein you re-sign all four and you're into the tax like we mentioned, or you operate as a cap room team, which is you're limited to that 28 million, which could go to 43 if Kelly were to opt out, which doesn't seem. I mean, we don't really know, but it doesn't really seem likely.
I think that's unlikely. Based on everything I've heard, I think that's, especially with the lack of playing time this year. I think unless he wants out of here, which I really don't think is the case. I
don't see why he would.
No, I think he's going to opt into that.
And the other thing is, it's like if Myers wants 10, if Goran wants 19, that's already 29 mil, right? That means if you're trying. You might as well go all four, right? Or I mean, they would have to make that decision how much tax they want to pay next season for that team. But it's like you can't.
Well, it could be three in the mid level. It could be 3 in the mid level, right? Basically, but even that, you're not going to squeeze it under 29. Well, once you're pushing,
no, they could get all four, and then
if they go over, they go
all four and still have access to the taxpayer mid level exception, which is 9.8 million.
Right, and they're not a repeater team now, so it's not as big a deal. This was why sometimes we get frustrated with the organization for doing certain things, but this was kind of why they did what they did with the Magruder switch 2 years ago, because it got them out of the. Last year, because it got them out of the repeater tax situation, so they can be a tax team now. Now, here's the other thing we haven't really considered. The primary owner of this team is in an industry that is probably the absolute worst industry to be in right now.
Or one of the worst, yeah.
Right? Coronavirus. Okay. Carnival stock was down 65% from what I saw.
Yeah, they put all that money into the stock market though, right? $1 trillion.
Well, that's not gonna save that stock this week.
I wonder, yeah.
Who's booking cruises for the next year, right?
Nobody. I've been driving around Uber passengers, and there was people who were, they had boats. They were pressuring these other countries that the cruises are going to let the people down. The countries didn't want to let the people down. Plenty of people had to reroute their trips because the cruises were canceled. It's been a whole mess. So it might throw a wrench into the tax.
Well, whether or not he wants to pay tax for his basketball team. I mean, Mickey has been open to paying tax when the team has warranted it, but his business has never been under siege like this. His other business, his primary business. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, people get upset at me for spending owners' money, right? Because I have found it a little bit ridiculous. And I think we're going to get an announcement from the Heat on Monday, by the way, about what they're doing, because it's been in the works. I know they've been working on in terms of what they're going to do for employees. I think I've counted there's a number of teams now that have done something, but I've been a little frustrated. I know, Nekias, you have been too, that I think it's admirable that guys like Kevin Love and Zion and Blake Griffin are stepping up and paying for salary, for employees at arenas, but I don't understand why people who are worth 1% of what the owners are worth, and it is about 1%, are the ones that are being expected to do this or feel that they have to do this or it's not going to get done. We're all in agreement. I think politically we all agree on that, right? But I get accused of spending owners' money. But in this particular case, I might understand if Mickey is a little bit less willing to go deep into a luxury tax for his NBA team when his primary business is worth much less than it was before.
It would be kind of disappointing if, remember all we talked about when that Winslow trade happened? Well, not all, but, we talked about one of the primary reasons for making that trade was the cap flexibility we're going to have this summer, right? They didn't have any cap room going into the summer, and now they could possibly have 28 million if they operate as a cap room team. And for all of that to just kind of be like, well, we re-signed Goran, we got Derek to a small number, and that's what we did with the money. We're not going into the tax. I wonder how you guys would react to that.
They may say that, but this also raises the question, Nekias, was it a smart move to extend Andre Iguodala for $15 million?
No, it was not. I don't think it seems like they had to do it to convince him to come out. But I also feel like if that's what you had to do to convince Andre Iguodala to play basketball for you, and you have Justice Winslow, who, I mean, he's not going to be done forever. Honestly, probably would have made more sense to kind of wait that out. But, I'm also high on Justice, so that's going to color my view a little bit.
And it looked like Justice was about to come back, too.
He was about to come back, yeah. Or he knew what was coming and knew he wouldn't have to play anyway. I don't know.
I wonder if maybe that makes the Heat feel a little bit of pressure to try to do something in the summer, like with the cap room, to not go into attacks and be like, all right, could we try to get DeRozan with the cap room and then re-sign Goran and then promise him some more money down the line over like a 4-year contract?
Right, but they might have to smooth this thing over a little bit because Jay Crowder. I think if the Heat end up giving Jay Crowder $12 million for 1 year, I think Heat fans will be like, okay, I mean he's earned it, right? I mean he's played to that level since he's been there. He offers them something, and I'm with you. Of the four of them, I think Jay has the most value to them.
Remember we talked about it like a month ago, and I said the same thing. It's the defensive issues have made him so much more valuable.
Well, what Nekias says, his ability to guard both forward spots, I think that's critical, and I think it takes a big burden off Jimmy. And so I do think it's important. But I think the four guys are pretty close for a bunch of different reasons. I think they've all proven some value. I'm not as high on DJJ now as I was because I think we've started to see some of those flaws. But from an age perspective, you could argue him first. I mean, from a uniqueness perspective on this roster, you could argue Myers first. From a just skill level perspective and service to the organization, you could argue Dragic first. From what they've actually provided over the past month, you would argue Crowder first. So I think it's a hard argument to make either way, but I do think we're going to have to start talking about this stuff. Like, I think Mickey's business plays into this now and where that goes over the next couple of months. And they're going to have to make some very difficult decisions. And how close is this team really? And that has always been what has determined whether the Arisons have been willing to go into tax. And I know people point to the 13 decision and Mike Miller, and I disagreed with it at the time. I disagreed with the Joel Anthony decision too.
Chalmers.
Right. But I kind of understood that a little bit. The Joel one, the Miller one, I still didn't understand. And then when Mike, played 82 games the next year and shot 45% from three, it looked worse. But I think this is going to be something we're going to talk about.
Another thing that we haven't really considered, since we don't know when the season is going to start again, or not, it's going to probably end up, if it does resume, it's going to be in the playoffs. What does that do to the draft and free agency? At what time will each of these things take place? We don't know when anything's going to happen.
Right.
So that throws a wrench into all of this, right?
They're going to have to change the league year.
This is like unprecedented.
It's unprecedented. We want to do an entire episode on the draft. I'm going to bring on a couple draft experts to just talk about what teams are doing now. I mean, there are a lot of teams that base a lot of their decisions on what they see in the conference tournaments and in the regionals, and there are no conference tournaments. There are no regionals. So, I mean, what do you do? I mean, you have Keith Askins, you've got Adam Simon, you've got Chet Kammerer, you've got all these people in the organization. Like, what are they watching now? I don't think the Heat are going to make anybody available because I don't think NBA teams in general are going to make anybody available to the media right now. But I think there's people we can talk to who cover the draft who can touch on this. I guess final thing, and then we're gonna go on this. Is if I was to say to you, and again, the numbers have to work. If I was to say to you, Nekias, you can get DeRozan, okay, but it means you're not gonna get Dragic and one of these other guys. Whether it's, say, Dragic and Crowder, Dragic and Leonard, Dragic and DJJ, you choose who?
I would say no Dragic, and I would also say no Myers at that point, just because I do think Bam at the 5 is what Miami's going to lean into, and ultimately, if you're going to go Bam at the 5, having as many switchable defenders as possible is going to be. It's going to be important. So you would just hope that another summer of shooting would help DJJ a little bit.
Right.
Being able to close games with Bam and DJJ and Jay Crowder and Jimmy, and then whoever else you put in that 5th spot. I guess Iguodala if you're doing offense, defense subs, Kendrick Nunn if he bulks up a little bit. That gives you something to close games with.
Right. It's interesting. I just think that they're going to be stuck trying to convince DeMar DeRozan to be a sixth man. I like what you're talking about him not closing games. I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think that would be the selling point, though. I don't think they will be able to get him to come off the bench like you guys mentioned. I think it would be, you're starting, you're going to play with Jimmy Bam and a couple of shooters in the lineup, and then you're going to be playing in lineups where you're not playing with Jimmy and Bam. They're going to have their own lineups. You're going to be coming, you're going to play with some of the bench guys, maybe one other starter, that type of situation where they're like, we just need the extra scoring. And you don't need to be the best scorer. You don't need to be a great defender. You don't need to be a great shooter. We've got all those things kind of just put up 20 for us and get to the free throw line, and then Jimmy, Bam, and the shooting will handle it at the end of the game.
Well, that's the thing, though. They need someone to anchor those no Bam, no Butler lineups, which Eric seems to like. And you can't anchor it with Iguodala, and really going forward, you can't anchor it with Dragic.
And so it would be awkward to
you can't anchor it with DeRozan.
It would be awkward to build lineups around those three. I understand, but at the same time, how much more awkward is it than instead of DeRozan being that third non-shooter, if it's one of the other non-shooters that they play there next to Jimmy and Bam, right? Like Iguodala or Crowder, who they can shoot, but they're not deadly either. Or when you put Derrick Jones Jr. there, I think they could make it work. It would just definitely be an awkward fit. And
what is what is DeRozan's foul rate at this? And how often is it? Because that's always been one of his great skills, has been getting to the line, which obviously Jimmy and Bam do. Has he still been productive in that way, getting the line?
I'm pretty sure he's still over 5. I can pull that up for you right now, actually. He's getting to the free throw line 6.6 times a game this year.
See that's where
about 42%.
Yeah, see, that's where there would be a real value there, particularly when Jimmy and Bam are not on the court. His ability to slow the game down
and create his own shot.
The 3-point shooting wouldn't worry me as much. Again, if Bam and Jimmy are not on the court, but you have DeRozan out there anchoring a lineup with Duncan and Hero.
Would you feel comfortable with that as a closing lineup, or maybe you substitute one of those guys for another defender, like the two shooters with Hero and Duncan, and then DeRozan, Jimmy, Bam? I
think it depends on the night, but I think the other thing we're seeing, and we haven't talked about it much. I mean, Tyler Hero got back on the court. He's going to be part of closing lineups starting next year. Every single one, because he's the one guy that's been proven this year that you could trust him offensively at the end of games, and so he's going to play at the end of games. So. His defense is not going to worry them, I don't think.
Yeah, I was just about to say it's mostly a point against Goran, but also DeRozan. If you believe in Tyler Hero specifically, but also Kendrick Nunn, I tweeted about it a little bit earlier today, and just throughout the season, Duncan Robinson becoming better as a passer when he sees two defenders at him. He's slipping in those pocket passes and stuff. The Heat have been a top 10 offense all year. They've been bottom of the barrel in defense since December. Do you need to bring in another shot creator, or do you just empower Kendrick Nunn, empower Tyler Hero, let those guys grow naturally, empower Duncan Robinson more, throw in a defensive wing or a defensive big?
So that's why
round out the second unit. I feel like that would be the easier way to kind of build it.
Do you think they could get like a defensive big to go along with a couple of the guys? Like, I think that's what be the hard part, right? It's like, would you be able to re-sign some of these guys and also get some more defensive guys? I just don't know if, like, either way we're going to end up settling for a good offensive team that just needs to be better on defense with what they have and re-signing Crowder and Derrick. Like, I think the whole thing is just we're going to end up leading into a similar type of team, right, as far as offensive defensive mold.
Yeah, well, I think my guess go ahead.
No, I'm just saying they're going to run into that regardless. I mean, that's just right. I mean, there's no way around that. I mean, they're not getting a two-way star this offseason. They're not.
That's like letting Goran and Myers walk. But Nekias, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think if you go the cap space route, you have $28 million to work with. You bring back Crowder, see if you can get him down to like 1 year, $10 million, and then you toss out the $18 million and see if you can get a Marc Gasol or a Serge Ibaka. Try to get one of those guys to kind of round it out. And then you trust your development. Yeah, Miami has their first round pick this year. They're
more affordable than he would have been otherwise. All right, guys, thanks for doing it. We ran long, and the thing is gonna shut us off. So we were wondering if we had material. The same thing about Alf and I the other night. Clearly, we have material. So we'll have a new podcast after. We're gonna have Rohan on from Sports Illustrated on with us. Talk about an article he wrote. He's gonna come on with us Monday. Nekias, thanks for doing it. Alex, we'll talk soon. And check out 5reasonsports.com.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.